Welcome to Fraud Friday. I'm Bob Coleman. We have an all-star panel. John Winnick, Clark Capital, Lance Sexton.
Good to be here.
Community Share Bank. I don't even know where you work these days, Lance.
And Community Bank and Trust.
Community Bank and Trust. Good to have you. And Delaney Sexton, Coleman, editor extraordinaire. John, we want you to hop on real quick. You're doing an awesome webinar series. What are we talking about on Tuesday, April 30th?
Yeah, we thought the timing was going to be great because we've had the earnings for the banks for the first quarter. It's been all over the place. A lot of differentiation between banks. And we're bringing back a group we've brought back a couple times. We've been doing these every 45 days or so with the rotating group of 4 different groups. And this group, we haven't done a webinar in 6 months. So it'll be a great opportunity to hear from Josh Siegel, who's probably the #1 expert in New York City on banks, particularly community banks. We've got Umrai Gill, who is an expert in bank liquidity management and securities portfolios and so on. And we also have Jim McAlpin, who is a great bank attorney who also serves on 2 bank boards.
And the price for this event is
$1 million. Absolutely free. You may have to listen to about a minute of infomercials, but well worth the investment.
No, it's great content. And we have a link on our website. It's in our daily. We'll also make sure it goes out on Monday. So take advantage of that. John, you really do a good job. And what I like with your guests is they break down the content it's targeted to how does this affect me as a banker? How does it affect me, whether I'm a community bank or a large bank? And they're not, and they don't deal in speculation. They deal on real world. This is where we are. Now they do have to do some interpretation, but it is good stuff. So what is the main theme that we're talking about on Tuesday?
I think there'll be I think kind of covering what we saw from the bank earnings. And, really the #1 concern for banks right now is, all related to margins and deposits and deposit pressures. And,
right.
That'll be a big topic going forward. I mean, banks that, are relying on wholesale funding and don't have good deposit franchises, are really seeing their deposit costs go way up. Hopefully those same banks have some ability to reprice their loans, and so their margins are still fine. But, there's literally hundreds of banks that, are currently not profitable. And, we're going to continue to get squeezed by these rates unless we get a break. And, the last week or two has shown us that rates are probably going to stay elevated for a while.
Very good. But John, I'm looking forward to that, and please take advantage of that. Well, we're going to live stream that on YouTube. You can also view it on Teams, and it's great content. Very good. John, you're welcome to stick around, or you can log off, but we're going to talk about fraud.
Okay.
Chris Roglieri, what's the latest on this, Delaney?
Yeah, we've got some fresh news this week, and it seems that the number has been climbing. The receiver has now estimated that more than $100 million is essentially missing. They're not sure where it is right now. He was sharing that $99 million in customer cash was deposited at Farmers Bank, and then another $83 million was deposited into KeyBank and Citibank accounts. Now, some of this money did go back to customers. The receiver said about $57 million did go back to customers, but that's leaving about $125 million in customer deposits that they are not sure
Lance,
what was done with them
exactly. Isn't that the definition of a Ponzi scheme?
It does seem that way.
It sure does, and the receiver said that from the start, that this is a Ponzi-like fraud scheme.
Hey, well, I have a question for John. John, what's interesting about the structure of these transactions is Prime Capital would book a line of credit, and then they would say, hey, give us a $5 million deposit, but what we're going to apply that for interest on your $100 million loan. It's going to cover interest payments for the next period of time, however many months that could cover that. How often have you seen that type of structure in your travels?
Yeah, I mean, typically, my understanding is they were managing investments for other people. Typically, if you're a PE firm and you have various investors and you're using that money and making investments with it, if it's any sort of institutional capital or any certain size, typically you'd have an administrator. You'd have a third-party administrator that would basically prevent you from doing that. I mean, these things tend to happen when there is no referee, and there isn't. If you had an auditor or you had an independent administrator, this would never have happened.
The bureaucracy would have shut it down, which in this case we needed a bureaucracy. And again, the old story is, if it seems to be too good to be true, it is. After Prime Capital was forced into involuntary bankruptcy, several of the Prime Capital officers got on the phone and said, hey, and this was in mid-December, got on the phone and said, hey, you have to close this by the end of the year if you still want to have this deal. And he convinced several people, there was a whole team, convinced a number of borrowers to wire the funds in order to secure the funding, because they couldn't promise anything January 1. So it was very much, they were pressured to do this. And once they wired the funds, all of a sudden they realized, well, what do we get?
Another update from this week that I will drop in: Roglieri's bankruptcy was originally Chapter 11, and they're now trying to make it a Chapter 7 in order to secure more assets to pay back creditors.
Give us a Chapter 11 versus 7 101, Lance. What's the difference?
Well, Chapter 7, they're going to take the assets that, and this looks like an individual bankruptcy on Chris.
Right,
so
this is individual.
They'll take the assets he has. They will sell those assets. They'll obviously pay secured creditors first, and then unsecured creditors second. Chapter 11 typically involves a reorganization and some sort of plan to repay debts out of the bankruptcy.
Yeah, and I mean, a key differential is, in a Chapter 11 plan, you have to demonstrate to the court and the creditors that your reorganization plan is better than a liquidation.
Yeah.
You liquidate, you receive 60 cents in the dollar, but if you allow us to reorganize, you ultimately receive 80 cents or whatever the recovery is.
Yeah.
So you have that the recovery is better than a liquidation.
So we're in a holding pattern with this, Delaney. Do we have any inkling of what the next step is, what the next shoe to drop is, or?
Not a clue.
Yeah.
There could be another company. There appears to be a federal investigation going on, but once again, there's no criminal charges at this moment.
Oh yeah. They're moving.
We'll see.
Yeah, the courts are moving very quickly on this. This just happened in December, and this all went down in February, and so it is moving with lightning speed for how the courts normally work.
Yeah.
What else you got for us, Delaney?
I have a story with 3 individuals who are being indicted. Now, it seems that there are some other co-conspirators that are now named at this time or charged. But I'm going to focus on Mr. Eric here. He was conspiring to take advantage of the PPP program. He had submitted 2 PPP loan applications for different companies he controlled, and he submitted them with fake documents, fake bank statements, and IRS tax forms. And both of these were approved for $285,000. After seeing that, he started recruiting other individuals with businesses that either were not operating or had very minimal operations at the time, and he introduced them to somebody who would prepare these PPP loan applications for them, get the fake bank statements and tax forms, etc., and submit it. And after they were approved and received money, Mr. Eric received 15 to 50% of the loan proceeds. These two other individuals, one of them was creating the IRS tax forms, and he was also helping create all the documentation, the paper trail to make it seem like they were using these funds for the right reasons to receive forgiveness. And then there's another individual who helped with all the documentation.
You know what the key thing is? I'm just reading the PowerPoint slide. He recruited other business owners with little to no operations. Again, you know, it's my view that, I mean, even a Google search would have eliminated a big chunk of the PPP fraud, but I guess there was no one at SBA or anywhere who could do that.
A simple LinkedIn search, a simple Google Earth search would have saved how much money, Lance?
You would have saved quite a bit, and John makes an excellent point. You know, I've dealt with the aftermath after it was done, and in a lot of instances, you have these fraudulent PPP loans. And John, I do exactly what you say. I go on Google, I put the name of the borrower, or the name of the business, and you pull it up, and you don't find a thing. So Google searches would have prevented quite a bit of PPP fraud.
Yeah, I mean, when you see that there's a machine shop doing $8 million a year in revenue from a studio apartment in the south side of Chicago, you probably should be a little skeptical.
Yeah.
And there were the classic PPP loans for farming organizations in the middle of Orlando. So
Yeah.
How much money was involved with this case, Delaney? Do we know?
So they're saying about 5 million, but again, there were other co-conspirators, of course, all these other business owners and potentially other individuals. So I'm not sure if this is an estimate for all of it or just specifically what these three people.
Well, Lance, you have to give them credit. They went through the entire process. They even helped get the PPP loan forgiveness, thinking that would clear everyone.
Well, and I think what, you know, anybody who's worked the PPP servicing side knows, once they've gotten forgiven, SBA is still reviewing forgiveness submissions for determination if they're proper. It's just like an IPERA review on a guarantee purchase. You know, SBA will go back and take a cut of those and look and make a determination if the guarantee purchase was proper. They're doing the same thing on forgiveness and guarantee purchase in PPP. So, you know, this seems like a full service fraud effort, Bob, Delaney, John, but
that's why they got 50%.
Well, you know, a question, an interesting thing, Lance, is like, okay, we can all appreciate that the government set up this task force to go after people, but one thing I'm curious about is what's the recovery rate on
great question.
Teams?
Delaney actually knows that. Let's let Delaney weigh in here. She knows that answer.
You know, I think you might be overestimating my knowledge. I can't give you a great answer. I know that they've been working really hard and they've managed to get back hundreds of millions, billions at this point, but I couldn't give you a percentage off the top of my head.
The problem is the money was spent on boats and stuff that you have to liquidate, and you know, it's not like
crypto, yes.
Yeah.
There are some alpacas. That one has really stuck with me.
Well, and I think one thing about PPP fraud that, you know, these larger PPP frauds, there are assets to seize. There are boats, there are cars, but what about the smaller PPP fraud where they got $20,000, they spent the money on who knows what, and it's gone.
Yeah.
And you've got a borrower that there's no possibility of recovery on.
Yeah. Delaney, let's skip to the last story. This is a fraud with a new twist. What's going on in Cleveland? One more, Anna.
This is not a traditional SBA loan fraud, I guess you could say. It is a spin on a scheme or a scam we all know and love. They are sending out false court documents in the mail, through text, through email, saying you're being investigated for PPP fraud and there's an arrest warrant out. Well, if you want to resolve the arrest warrant, you got to go to a cryptocurrency kiosk and make a payment. It's a classic.
Is that your
classic.
Operation Lance? Is that how? Is that?
I'm going to say that we have not used a cryptocurrency kiosk for repayment on these SP. That should have been the. However, I had this conversation with my mom one day when somebody called and claimed they were with the IRS. My mom has lived a good long life, diligently paid her taxes as agreed, and they called her up and said, "Hey, you are in default on your federal tax." I said, "Mom, the IRS is not going to call you. So the next time they call, just hang up." This is one of those scams that, I'm not going to be surprised if we don't see more of these where people are trying to get individuals who had PPP loans and
it's all public record. It's all public record.
Make them think that they're in trouble and get them to run and send. Like I said, I don't even know where a cryptocurrency kiosk is. So I would assume the cities have that, but small communities like mine do not.
My local liquor store has one. I did it. My head did a 360 when I saw it. I couldn't believe it.
So, Bob, there's something wrong with getting your arrest warrant taken care of at the liquor store.
Hey, but if it works, it works, right?
It works, yeah.
Hey, I want to great reporting, Delaney. Lance, real quick, I want you to give us a glimpse of you just got back from Nagel. I want you to talk real quick about the big takeaway, and we're going to do a webinar on it. What's the big news that came out that everyone needs to know about?
Well, first of all, there was a huge crowd at Nagel, over 600 lenders. There was a significant representation by SBA headquarters, Susan Strike, John Miller, Eddie Ledford, and others. There was a huge contingent. A lot of good training. There was not a lot of new things. The 5057 3.1 is going to be out sometime this summer. That SOP is basically making some corrections to the 5057.3 and making it, match up with the 5010 7.1. There will be a new lender servicing matrix that comes out with it. Now, Bob, I love servicing and liquidation. And the one statistic that jumped out significantly to me was Eddie Ledford from Okram presented a statistic that indicated early defaults on SBA loans have almost doubled in the past 12 months, which I think we're all starting to see. SBA 7A borrowers that are struggling with their payments. We're seeing loans that go into default. And Bob, I say this time and time again, servicing and liquidation is more important now than ever.
Lance, define early default, and why is that of importance to lenders?
Well, early default is a loan that defaults within 18 months of the final disbursement or on a revolving line of credit within 18 months of the initial disbursement. When you have an early default loan, your UPP or your purchase demand kit, whichever you want to call it, your universal purchase package is under greater scrutiny and requires more information. That's a situation where your credit memo is going to get looked at very hard. The projections and their assumptions are going to get looked at very hard. The tax transcript information that you collect is going to get looked at very hard, and the disbursements will. So an early default loan, it's not that if you have an early default, you can't get paid on the guarantee, but it's going to get a lot greater scrutiny from one of the SBA servicing centers. And
I can say this: you can't. If there's an early default, SBA is going to assume the lender made a mistake because the lender did not provide enough capital to keep that business going. So there's an error there that's going to. They're going to pick apart. They're going to take a good hard look at what you did, and they're going to say, hey, if the lender didn't do their job underwriting, taking the collateral and doing and understanding the cash flow, we're going to have an issue with paying on that guarantee. So that's why that's important. Yeah.
An early default loan, they're going to pick apart your credit memo. And you talked about working capital, Bob. When we do a SBA loan, we're certifying as a lender that we evaluated their working capital and we're making sure they have enough for at least the next 12 months. They're going to pick apart your disbursements to make sure they're according to the SBA loan terms and conditions.
And frankly, rightly, and I don't have an issue with that. Rightly so.
No, not at all.
I'm saying that's what SBA is going to do, and that's part of being in the game. John, great. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you on Tuesday. We will have the link out. It's on our website now, and we will also send it out on Monday. Delaney, good stuff. Lance, welcome back from Nagel. Thank you for joining us on Fraud Friday. See you next week. Thank you.
Have a great weekend.